I want to understand why you think democracy as it's practiced around the globe today is failing us.
Why it's failing? I think elections are largely to blame, actually. I think the electoral system encourages people to stand up and aim for media sound bites rather than substance. It promotes more charismatic people. It promotes people who appeal to more emotions and fears rather than actual, logical debate, or not even logical debate, reasoned debate. I think what we need to solve the solutions that we have is a bit more balanced, a bit more informed settings.
If we consider specifically representative democracy, how does power disrupt the trust that we have with our representatives?
So there's two definitions of representation, actually. And one is that you represent the ideas of people, and the other is to actually represent them in a sort of demographic sense, that the assembly actually looks like the community that it's meant to represent. So at the moment, the theory is that it represents the ideas, but the practice is not that. Why is it not that? Because the system is distorted by vested interest, by money, by, if you look at the US, half of the politicians are millionaires, for example. So of course, if you get a room full of millionaires, what do they decide? It's not exactly representative, I don't think, of what the actual people think. So what citizens' assemblies try to do is move it to a different form of representation. So it's also representative democracy, but demographically representative.
Let's tackle that beast, sortition.
Yep.
It sounds like a Harry Potter spell that you're casting. Tell me what sortition is and why citizens' assemblies are your offering as a way of solving this issue.
So sortition is just a technical name for random selection. So we could just say, let's use random selection. But random selection has a lot of baggage. You could also, and the word random is often, has lots of negative consequences, etc. You could use the word lottery. So sometimes they use the word civic lottery. So what it is you randomly select people. So to bring them into an assembly where you inform them and get them to deliberate with very different people with very different opinions, and then you get the political decision out of that. Does that answer your question?
No, I want to understand a little bit more. Give me an example. So for example, if we had to decide, let's say, Brexit.
Yes.
How would we do that? Because a referendum is a representative, democratic way of trying to express the will of the people.
I loathe referendums.
Okay, well that's where we stand on that. But it's a tool that we have in our democratic arsenal to say this is how we're going to exercise the will of the people. How are citizens' assemblies and sortitions representative of the will of the people?
Yes.
And so how do they harness that trust?
Yeah. So it depends on what your ideal of democracy is. To me, why I say I loathe referendums is because you're asking a yes-no answer to a very complicated question without any access to balanced information, distorted by media reporting, distorted by buses running around in Brexit with lies printed on the side, for example. To me, the ideal democracy is, again, one where you have balanced information and some deliberation going on, where you have to try to justify. You don't just say, I think this. You say, I think this because. Right. And you have to explain and try to understand and empathize. And so a citizens' assembly is this very artificial space where you can inform the people in that environment and you can get them to actually deliberate with each other and try to explain why they think the way they do. And people actually change their mind. So it's not actually the will of the people in the sense of what people do think, but what they would think in an ideal environment.
What are some of the limitations to sortition? Things that you're worried are going to maybe... Is it expensive? It sounds expensive.
They can be expensive. So in Scotland, they're having a citizens' jury on the future of... A citizens' assembly, on the future of Scotland. And yeah, the bill for that is in the millions. It depends if you think democracy is worth it. Of course, election campaigns cost millions, tens of millions of dollars to run, pounds or whatever. One of the biggest limitations today is connecting it to political power.
Right.
So they run citizens' assemblies and you get the report, okay, this is the considered will of the people, if you like. They give it to the politicians, and what do the politicians do with it is the next step. In Ireland, Relatively famously, they then went to a referendum on removing the constitutional ban on abortion, which was successful after running a citizens' assembly process.
In Ireland, you had a situation where there was deadlock.
Yep.
People for abortion rights, people against
Yep.
choice, a woman's right to choose.
Yep.
And citizens' assemblies, or what you're advocating for, played a really important role in that.
Yes.
Talk me through what happened.
So the government in Ireland decided to hold a citizens' assembly on an array of topics. It was their second national citizens' assembly. The first one led to a referendum on same-sex marriage, actually, a successful referendum as well. So this one, they brought together 99 randomly selected people and a judge, not sure if it was a retired judge, to chair the whole process, so 100 people in a room. And they spent weekends for months discussing the topic. They got public input, they heard from experts, they heard from people with real life experiences. The constitutional ban on abortion section was, I think, maybe 7 or 8 days where they discussed the topic, listened to experts, and then they came to a proposition. They said, right, actually, we think you should remove this constitutional ban on abortion, and it was actually a bit more detailed than that. That became the basis of a report that went to government, and the government said, right, we're going to act on this recommendation, but it's a constitutional change, so it had to go to a referendum by law. So then that went to a referendum, and the electoral result, the referendum result, was essentially almost exactly the same as the Citizens' Assembly result. And I think when people see people like them deliberating this issue, they have trust in it. They go, that's not a politician who's just here to win the next election. That's just someone who really cares about this issue.
How does accountability fit into a system of sortition?
If this randomly selected group of people were making a decision that was grossly unpopular, you would still expect millions of people on the street to make their voice heard. The other key thing is it's term limited. So these people would serve their term. Thank you very much. See you later. You can't be randomly selected again.
I worry that the applicability of sortition and citizens' assemblies works for Extinction Rebellion. It works maybe in a small system like the United Kingdom. How do you apply it to maybe a federalized system or a country that works with varying differences in provinces and powers? You might have a system, say, for example, in America, where they have states' rights that they defend very vehemently. Mm-hmm. So is your idea scalable?
Very scalable. So they've just had a citizens' assembly in the UK on how to redevelop a town centre. Very local. Just that city level, the town centre's being emptied, all the high street shops are closing. What can we do with that space? So just the people from that area, randomly selected, talking about how to redevelop the town centre. So I think the first thing is to hold citizens' assemblies on local topics and get people aware of how they work, make people see the result they can have. You can then build that up to city level, to nation level. In East Belgium, there's been a very exciting development actually. There's a small region in East Belgium, the Ost-Belgian region. It's the German-speaking region. That parliament has just passed a law to set up a permanent randomly selected body, a citizens' council, alongside the elected chamber. So that is, to me, the next step, this institutionalisation of citizens' assemblies.
Brett Hennig, thank you so much for talking to me.
Pleasure.